Could you tell a little bit about what brought you to writing something about just them? Because I think for some people, they'll say, you wrote a whole book on the Magi. Isn't that kind of a brief section of Matthew? Like, there's not a lot there, right? So how did you bring together materials to write a book? What's going on in that?
Yeah, it really, I mean, that's one of the things I kind of talk about in the intro is just how short this passage is, right? It's like 12 verses in Matthew
Yeah.
and very, I mean, very vague, right? I mean, not in a bad way. It's just it's not nearly as detailed as people remember it from their kind of childhood. If you grew up, with nativity plays and those sorts of things. Um, and so really what led me to write it was I had just defended my dissertation and I was kind of looking for the next thing to do. And I just kind of I took a little bit of pleasure just going to the library and just spending a day kind of poking around. And one of my dissertation committee members had mentioned that he was surprised that I didn't talk about the Magi in my dissertation, which was on the Proto Gospel of James, which doesn't include
Hmm.
the story of the Magi. And so I just got sort of started to think about what would it look like to do something on the Magi and an article or something like that. But the more I read that day and then the coming weeks, I just started seeing a lot of looking at biblical commentaries. I started seeing a lot of the same sorts of explanations for them. They're Gentiles from the East and they're astrologers and they're all of these things. Um, and I just kind of found myself very dissatisfied by that. And I
Hmm.
just kept thinking there has to be more here. And so then I started poking around in kind of more reception oriented stuff and seeing, what sort of people today were saying about them. And as it turns out, people today say all sorts of things about them. There's like, people who are talking about, sorcery and necromancy and the star is a UFO and all of those things. And so I thought, well, I wonder now what's happened in between the two. And then I started just seeing that there's this whole very rich tradition involving these characters that I mean, Matthew's story is just really a seed that grows into this entire forest. And
Hmm.
so it took me a little while to really get around to writing it, but I had just pages and pages of notes sitting on my desk forever. And then during the COVID pandemic, and I was kind of looking for something to do with the time that I wasn't spending commuting to college. And then I talked with a friend of mine at Fortress and said, is this something that we want to do? And he said, yeah, it sounds interesting. And then here we are.